Content is intended to provide accurate information, however, is not intended as financial, tax, or legal advice. Please consult a financial, legal, or tax professional for specific information regarding your individual situation. Opinions expressed and provided are for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security.
Welcome to Game Plan for Retirement with Chris Mcintire. Mcintire Retirement Services, Northwest Ohio's retirement planning resource.
And welcome into the program. This is your game plan for retirement with Northwestern Ohio's resource for that common sense approach to planning that we all need in this crazy, complex financial world. He is president and founder of Mcintire Retirement Services. Welcome back, Chris Mcintire. Thanks for being here.
Hey, good morning. It's good to be with you there, buddy. Hope everything's going well and hope all the listeners are having a good weekend here.
A pleasure, Chris. We appreciate your time, and we always need the guidance and advice, I think, that you provide here on the program, just bringing it down to earth and down to a level that we can understand what we should be doing with our money. And, you know, we earn money, we work for it, we spend it on the things that we want and need, but then we try to save some of it so that we can afford to do those things out through retirement when we're no longer earning a paycheck. And I think that's where the majority of the questions and the confusion lie. There's so many choices and options. We got to navigate those and find the best ones for our situation. That's what you help people do each and every day there at Mcintire Retirement Services.
Yeah, TMI, too much information. Sometimes information overload just leads to confusion, and people say, well, you know, what's worse, to use a cliche, the devil I know or the devil I don't know. I'm going to just continue to do what I've been doing and hope it works out. So we try to help cut through some of those layers of confusion to say, look, this is growth, this is safe, this is in the middle, and, you know, all of the different options that you might have for creating an investment plan. This is the good, the bad, and the ugly of all of those individual pieces, because let's be honest, you know, nothing's perfect out there. An FDIC insured certificate of disappointment, you know, is safe. But it's not going to continue to keep pace with inflation, which is probably the buzzword here for the first half of 2021 anyway.
Yeah, sure. Home prices, building prices. They're saying now, Chris, that the chips that are used in the computers in these cars are scarce. And so the car prices are going up for the cost of new and used vehicles. I think inflation is something that we haven't necessarily had to deal with for quite some time. At least the government's told us that it's at least non-existent. But we are seeing it here. And the way that inflation has worked historically is that it remains level for a period of time, but then it spikes pretty significantly for a period of time. And we may be entering one of those periods.
It certainly is appearing that way. And whether or not, you know, the supply chain corrects itself, if you will, you know, a ship sideways in the Suez Canal didn't help things. That created even more gridlock. Lots of goods and services flow through that piece of waterway, and the port in Long Beach and Los Angeles. Again, me being a boater, I kind of watch those ports, and I can look at all the freighters that are docked in or at anchor, I would say. And it's incredible. Sometimes there's 45 cargo ships waiting to unload. And, you know, on those ships are refrigerators, and, you know, our dishwasher went down, you know, probably in the month of December. And here it is. We still have not gotten our replacement dishwasher. So the Whirlpool plant in Findlay, Ohio, here where they make them, had to shut down temporarily because they couldn't get any steel. So if, you know, how does that impact, you know, people's portfolios? Well, you know, Whirlpool doesn't need to put any dishwashers on sale because they can sell everything they've got at whatever the list price is. And, you know, you look at going to build a new home right now, home construction prices, if you can get the lumber and the materials, are significantly higher now than what they were 2-3 years ago. And part of this is pandemic driven, from companies shutting down and then all of a sudden ramping up, trying to catch pace with you know, the rate of growth as economies will eventually open up around the globe.
But Chris, my concern here is if people continue to buy things at these higher prices because of the production glut and because of the marketplace having some clogs in it, if they are willing to continue paying that, what's the incentive for companies to turn around and lower prices once the flow of goods and manufacturing gets going again?
Peter, that's a great point, buddy. And it's literally the laws of supply and demand here. And, as long as the demand is there and the supply isn't there to keep up with it, prices are not going to come down. Inflation is, by definition, too much money chasing too few goods. And you add in the stimulus that keeps pouring into play. And, I think some of the issues we're having is, you and I have to watch our political talk here, but you can't pay people to stay at home and not work when there's help wanted signs all over the place. So, if the reward to stay home and do nothing is greater than the reward to go back to work, there's some issues with people making widgets, if you will, in dishwashers.
Well, if you have questions or concerns about making your financial progress, if you would like a game plan for retirement for your situation, a snapshot of where you currently are, a discussion of defining those goals, writing them down, documenting them so you know that you are working to achieve them, and then specific recommendations, a timeline of executable action items from a qualified, experienced professional with the options across the spectrum in the financial world of which option is best for your situation and your specific goals, pick up the phone, give Mcintire Retirement Services a call. Chris Mcintire makes that offer, that opportunity available to you. That is the value of tuning in right now to this program. You can get that plan in your hands. 800-868-1194 is the number to call. That's 800-868-1194, 800-868-1194. Now, Chris, we talked about kind of the confusion, all of the different choices and options and what to do with our money. There are some investors who are very astute. They've been savvy, they have been successful, and they've built up a nice retirement nest egg. And then it comes time to make that transition, and they're still hesitant to do that. They're nearing retirement and they're getting second thoughts. They're worried what that's going to look like in retirement. Do you deal with that ever talking with savers and investors there at Mcintire Retirement Services?
Oh, most definitely, Peter. This is a big emotional event in someone's life. The fact that we've gone from being, savers to spenders, if you will. And for some folks, if you haven't done that for 40 years, that's one heck of a transition. And, I built this big nest egg. What an accomplishment. And, maybe it's $1 million, $1.5 million, 700,000, whatever that number is, and now I've got to all of a sudden start pulling money out of that. I'm used to putting money into it. I'm used to only seeing it go up, even if the market goes down, because I've been putting money into it. So the behavioral characteristics of money are going to change when you retire. And it becomes more about, kind of a preservation phase or going into an income phase where, what got you to retirement might have been growth. What might get you through retirement might be income, looking for dividends, interest, all of those different aspects where growth is, all right, Amazon went from nothing to $1 gazillion, basically, Tesla, nothing to $1 gazillion, but they don't pay any dividends. And when you go into retirement, you might look for more of that certainty of the dividend income coming in to replenish the checking account, if you will.
Chris, I was talking with a couple that had built up a pretty nice nest egg for themselves. They were upwards of 2.5 million, and certainly had enough to provide for their retirement. But the gentleman turned to me and he said, once I begin withdrawing, if I see my account balance start to go down even slightly, it's going to make me nervous. And he said what he wanted was a system, a plan in place that would provide the income and allow him to identify what was available to continue treating as an investment, as investment capital. And I thought that was a pretty astute and savvy way of looking at his goals and knowing himself and his emotions, what he needed his money to do for him.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept there, and saying that, look, I've identified what I need, I've identified what I have, and now I need to create a plan on what do I use and when do I use it. So, let's take 2020 for an example. And sorry, folks, I hate to keep bringing up 2020, but it's our most recent example of, that we had a significant correction in the stock market. And, if you had a safe money strategy, you could have said, all right, I'm going to come over here and pull money out of my safe money strategy. I'm going to give my growth or my growth strategy time to recover. That would be a good example of probably what the gentleman you were meeting with, wanted to accomplish. We certainly do a lot of that. That's kind of the foundation of what we do is, create an income plan. Doesn't mean we've only got one option. An income plan is going to have a couple of different options. If option A isn't working out, then we can rely on option B, for an example.
Chris, you talked about how retirement was a big life transition, and there are a few others that we talk about getting cold feet with, right? You hear about with marriage, that people get cold feet before the wedding. Retirement is something that we don't have to jump all the way into. And maybe that's the solution for somebody who feels like financially, yeah, I may be prepared, but I'm a little nervous to actually make the transition. They can, in fact, transition into retirement, maybe find some midway point where they're doing a little bit more of what they want to do on their schedule rather than what they have to do on a set time clock.
Correct. The entire process is, typically going to unfold over the course of time. And, let's say you want to retire at age 65, where you transition into Medicare for your health insurance. Once you're in your late 50s, you want to start looking at, do I need to alter my investment objectives here where, okay, I've created a large sum of money. As long as I don't take a 40% correction, we ought to keep building until we get to that 65 standpoint, and, maybe shifting some assets into some more conservative approaches, and not to abandon the growth side. We're certainly going to need that. And, that's part of the process that we take people through is say, look, just because you retired doesn't mean you can't invest for any type of growth. You might be retired for 30 years, and live to age 95. You certainly need to plan and have that type of growth to outpace inflation over the long haul.
Chris, when we go swimming for the first time in the summer, we always kind of dip our foot in the water to test the temperature, right? And that's something that, as we're making this transition in our portfolio, kind of as an analogy here, we could begin to see what type of results we're getting, what type of income our portfolio is capable of generating. We don't have to take it as an income. We can reinvest it back into the portfolio for future growth and continued growth. But maybe for that 5 to 10 years before retirement, we do begin to stick our toes in the water metaphorically and see what that retirement portfolio is more like.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And, instead of jumping in with both feet, so to speak, and, you kind of look at it like a doctor analogy as well and say, look, here's a couple of symptoms that you're going to be suffering as you go into retirement. Why don't we start treating one of those symptoms now? And it might be nervousness about the stock market, might be nervousness about the bond market, and in a lot of cases, for us, it's about furthering your education into all of the other strategies that are available versus a retirement lifestyle mutual fund that had become so commonplace for the 401k, 403b environment. We're not bashing anything here whatsoever, but there are lots of different options out there. And our job is to tell people, look, you need to be objective. And, we live in a world, unfortunately, of disinformation right now. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, it's like, look, is this a real tweet that somebody really put this out there? Is this fact or is this fiction? And, how do you ascertain what that is? And, if I may, if I have a bias toward a specific investment, and, I will want to put out information that made that investment look better or made others look worse. So, how do you cut through that? Because how many times do we hear, well, I read on the internet about, so-and-so said this about that, and Susie Orman said this about that. Dave Ramsey said this about that. It's like, look, there might be whole truths in there. There might be half truths in there. And our job is to, because we sit across the table from people, is to help them realize, look, here's a better picture. Might be the whole answer. A lot of these phrases and analogies that people hear and bring to us, end in a semicolon, if you will, not a period.
Yeah. And Chris, as I understand it, some of the powers that be, the Securities Exchange Commission, the Department of Labor, the DOL, they have sort of loosened the reins on some of the advertising of returns that financial advisors can do. So in a world where the water was already a bit muddy, are we getting ready to see further cloudiness in what we might be able to ascertain and decipher between truth and fact or fiction?
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that, and we have such this political discord going on here in the country right now, and that spills over into everything else, obviously. And hopefully that those characteristics can come back to, basic fact, basic fiction instead of half fact, half fiction, if you will. And it's hard because there's so much information nowadays. Investors have the ability to look at research and do some things there, but most of them don't know what the truth really is. Why is a Ford better than a Chevy, or vice versa?
Well, you spoke about those target date funds or those life cycle funds. And I think that those have become, Chris, so popular because they have an element of, or a feel like they are on autopilot. Oh, well, I've chosen my specific target date, and therefore I don't really need to be paying attention because the fund is doing what it needs to do to get me to that date. And I don't think that people necessarily want to retire from their career just to become full-time financial planners, but we do need to have a middle ground where we're not so out of the loop that we're just putting the entire plan on autopilot and putting it in faith that it's going to do its job, but we're also not necessarily having to pay 100% attention to the market minute by minute, second by second.
Yeah, Peter, you bring up a wonderful point there in that, a retirement target date, man, that just sounds like a turnkey piece. And, does it really line up with what your true risk tolerance is? Do you know the equity, the stock portion versus the bond portion in there? When do you add in a real estate element? When do you add in commodities, that type of thing, to really align with what your goals and features are? Because your entire retirement isn't 2020 fund or a 2030 fund. May make sense for those of you that are out there working and you got plenty of time to throw it in a 2030, 2045 fund, so to speak, depending on your age. That may be the best option for you and simplify things. But the closer you get to retirement, those mistakes, that margin of error, if you will, gets greater, and mistakes can be very, very costly. So really understanding your exposure to the different types of risks that are out there, longevity risk being the biggest one, stock market exposure, interest rate risk, inflation risk, healthcare risk, so on and so forth.
Well, I believe that a lot of that middle ground comes in having a plan and having a relationship with a planner advisor. And if you would like to double check your plan, if you would like to form that relationship with an advisor, if you would like to get your game plan for retirement put together, pick up the phone, give McIntyre Retirement Services a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194, 800-868-1194. Chris McIntyre, part of the value of the program and tuning in right now is that he is offering to put together your game plan for retirement, custom, specific to you, your situation, a discussion of your goals, documenting those, and then a timeline of executable action items so that you can work to achieve them. This is not 1,000 pages of financial jargon, by the way. This is simple, easy to understand language that you can execute. Pick up the phone and give a call, 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. And Chris, you just spoke of several different risks there. Kiplinger recently released this article, The 6 Retirement Killers. Number one on that list was not having that written retirement income plan. I think more and more, even the mainstream media and the big financial institutions are recognizing the need for this specific aspect of the plan that thus far to this point has really been missing.
Yeah, Peter, I just did a review with a client about the first time we touched base in probably a year or so, the pandemic and everything. And we were doing a Zoom appointment, and I brought up their plan that we had built together probably 2 years ago and said, look, let's walk through this. Let's get everything here updated, the balances and whatnot. And he happened to work for a company whose stock has performed very, very well through the pandemic. So, where we had projected the growth was even lower than where his real growth was. So we updated all the numbers, and man, just see the relief on his face, because they're coming up on retirement. It's nervous for them. And, be able to, in this particular case, give some reassuring, advice saying, look, now we're $150,000 ahead of where we thought we were going to be 2 years ago. And, that still, it's market driven. So obviously not, not guaranteed, but we've got some guaranteed resources for them. And, they're basically debt free. They could live off of Social Security income if they had to. And, in looking at retirement, a little bit with a little bit brighter, Mr. Brightside, I'll say.
Yeah, positive reviews and news when we do those check-ins is always a good thing. But I think on the other side of that, Chris, we've got to sort of ask ourselves, hey, if we're meeting next year, if we flash forward a year from today and the market is down 50%, how much do I want to have lost if that was to be the case? And then how I am positioned today, where my assets and accounts and investments actually are, how much am I positioned to lose if a year from today the market is down 50%? We've got to look at it from a pessimistic outlook kind of standpoint, and if it's better than that, fantastic.
True. If it works in a worst case scenario, it works better in an average case or even a best case scenario. So, typically when we're building our retirement plans for folks, we're using a hypothetical 5% rate of return on the investment side, on the risk side. And, if we perform better than 5%, fantastic. But this is an area where you don't want to get overly aggressive and say, all right, well, I made 7% last year. Let's forecast that out into the future. Like, look, that's a very robust rate of return. And, what we had previously isn't necessarily what we're going to have going into the future. We got some big deficits and, a lot of other areas that we have to overcome to continue to grow our economy. Inflation could be a big issue. And if you look back at the 60s and the 70s with the stock market and high inflation, we did not perform very well. In fact, the Dow Jones Industrial Average averaged about 1% through the 70s, and in a period of high inflation and high taxation. And we're probably leaning more toward that direction than lower inflation, lower taxation.
And Chris, I think you just hit on the number two issue, the two out of 6 retirement killers, as cited in this Kiplinger article, using the wrong investment return assumptions in your plan prior to and in retirement. A lot of people are kind of projecting out no inflation or flat inflation, maybe 1 or 2%, and then they're projecting the rate of return at 8 to 10%. Again, your plans, you use a 5% rate of return. And I bet you have people kind of question that and say, well, isn't that a little low? But I'm sure that you also talk to them, well, if it works in this situation and we get better than that, or kind of more reasonable rates of return, then that puts you in an even better situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Better to plan for more conservative and err on the side of caution than err on the side of aggressiveness. And that is the dog barking out in the yard. That's Corona pandemic 2021.
Taking too much risk with your investments, Chris, the number 3 killer of retirement, as cited by this Kiplinger article. I know this is something you help people really examine and sort of quantify, and then talking through what risk is and returns mean for them. Those two things have always sort of been combined into one entity, one being, the risk and the return. We really sort of need to separate those out, because they are truly separate things when we're looking at our money and our finances, aren't they?
They sure are, Peter. And, there are a number of different risks. Longevity, again, being the biggest one, because the longer you have to live, the more chances of, unforeseen things happening. God, look at the pandemic, of course. That's probably the one we're going to be talking about, from now until the end of eternity, if you will. But interest rate risk is going to be huge on the bond market. And, more retirees buy bonds for safety. They diversify portfolios. They help diversify stock market risk. Inflation now, which hasn't been much of a factor, is certainly is moving itself from the back burner to the front burner, probably a good analogy to make there. And then healthcare risk, I've got aging parents right now. We help somebody who's got a cognitive issue, who has a long-term care policy and pays for everything. We've got another loved one where we're, trying to work through some government assistance, and, just the opposite ends of the spectrum on who's going to be paying the bill, so to speak. And, that's probably one of the biggest ones that people, hope doesn't happen to them. Very few plan for it happening to them. And that would be probably my highlight for 2021 right now, guys, is make sure you've got a plan for unforeseen medical expenses like the long-term care stays.
And we actually spoke a lot about that last week on the program. Chris, you had that report about the 4 approaches to long-term care. Ladies and gentlemen, if you visit the website, McIntire Retirement Services, you could listen to that article, listen to that podcast, download that article and that report, or give Chris a call and request it. Some great food for thought. If you're thinking about this for your own situation, if you want to talk to maybe parents about this issue and how prepared they are, I encourage you to get that report, give Chris a call, and start those conversations in a very easy way using this information. What is your plan? How are we as a family planning to handle this possibility? And here are some of the options. And a great program last week, informative on that topic. It doesn't have to be out of pocket expenses that are use it or lose it, never to be seen again. There are some great alternative approaches available to this now. So give Chris a call, again, request that report, or if you have this as a hole in your plan, something that's been in the back of your mind as an unaddressed issue, request that game plan for retirement. Chris can help you find the correct solution for that big issue. 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. Chris, another killer of retirement that Kiplinger points out, not enjoying the people and activities that you thought you would in retirement. That's kind of an interesting one, not maybe necessarily on the financial side, but do you find that maybe retirement isn't for everyone?
Yeah, what's funny, my wife was just talking, we got a client, he's just getting ready to retire right now. And his wife is like, I don't know what I'm going to do having him around, all the time now. I'm a clean freak. He's not necessarily the clean freak. So yeah, there's certainly adjustments, you've spent, most of your careers doing different things. Now, all of a sudden you got to bring it back together and spend more time. Sometimes you kind of have to rebuild the relationship. Let's be honest, I'm fortunate. My wife and I kind of work in the same business here. So, we know when to turn it off and when to turn it back on. Some folks have, I've worked with these 8 individuals for my entire life, and all of a sudden I've just cut them loose and, I don't have contact with them. It's a heck of an adjustment for certain individuals. Yeah. Absolutely. And then, given the pandemic here, it's not like you're playing cards and things like that we once did. And hopefully we're closer to getting that back into place than ever before. But it's been especially those of us with elderly parents where we haven't been able to see them and spend time with them, or, other loved ones, of course, aunts and uncles and all of that. It's certainly been a challenge and some emotional trauma there that will take some time to heal.
For the sake of time, Chris, I'm going to skip over number 5, giving too much money to the kids, a killer of retirement, a possible killer of retirement. But straight to number 6 here, and I'm sure you've got some comments on this of what people need to be doing rather than having blind faith, but blindly believing when your financial professional says you are going to be okay. Chris, it's more than just a hope or a projection or an assumption when you have that written retirement income plan. And I think a lot of this Kiplinger article boils down to that.
Sure, and you have to plan for the unexpected, and because the unexpected does happen. Life is what happens to plans, and so you need to make sure you're prepared with all your insurances, your legal framework and whatnot, to execute in a moment if it needs to be.
Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like a game plan for retirement, a report and analysis on how to maximize Social Security, that written retirement income plan, a snapshot of where you are currently, and a discussion of your goals, documenting those so you know you're working to achieve them. Goals put in writing are more likely to be accomplished. And then Chris will provide you with recommendations on how to accomplish those steps that you can take in order to achieve those goals and turn them into your realities into the future. That is what he calls the game plan for retirement. It addresses your investments, your income, your taxes, your healthcare, your legacy, the fees that you're paying, the risks that you're taking. Pick up the phone, give Chris Mcintire a call if you would like your custom personal specific game plan for retirement. 800-868-1194. That's 800-868-1194. No cost, no obligation for that, by the way. Similar plans can easily go upwards of $1,000 to several thousands of dollars. Chris makes it available to you. No cost, no obligation. 800-868-1194. And Chris, we always appreciate the gentle reminder here on the program that you give us that planning is important and we need to be taking this seriously.
It's my pleasure, Peter. Hope everybody has a good, safe weekend out there and enjoying some time up here on the North Coast.
Visit McIntyreRetirementServices.com for many additional valuable resources, including other great episodes of Game Plan for Retirement with Chris Mcintire. Be sure to subscribe.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.
Any comments regarding safe and secure investments and guaranteed income streams refer only to fixed insurance products. They do not refer in any way to securities or investment advisory products. Indexed or fixed annuities are not designed for short-term investments and may be subject to caps, restrictions, fees, and surrender charges as described in the annuity contract.